West of the Moon by M C Neuffer. There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the roots. Henry David Thoreau. March 1869. The Arrival. 4 years after General Lee surrendered to General Grant, 4 years after Lincoln was assassinated, the people of Danbury, Pennsylvania, fought a different war as winter angrily refused to yield to spring. It was a battle against nature, and some later said, God. Torrents of water, flows of mud, whipping wind, and thick darkness pressed from all sides, taking possession of the town. Through a window, in flashes of lightning, Ida and her sister-in-law, Pauline, caught sight of a naked girl in the road. A broken-winged sparrow, glowing against the night in the sheeting downpour from the hard sky. Alone. No man or boy saw the girl's shining alabaster skin and long white hair as she stood drenched, a luminous specter in the black night. Every man, even those missing an arm or leg left behind in battle-churned places, worked feverishly to reinforce the earthen levee to protect the millways and town center. She'll perish if we don't bring her in, said Pauline. Through the strangling rain and mud, they reached the girl. Wrapping her in a blanket, Pauline's hand touched the swell of the waif's stomach. She's with child. Her words fought to find Ida's ears in the roar of wind and tumble of water as they struggled to return to Pauline's house. Once the door was shut, Pauline said, Bring her closer. Sit her in Robert's seat while I fetch a dry blanket. The poor thing. Ida took off her drenched rain cape and bonnet, then knelt to examine the girl swallowed up in a man's chair, feet not reaching the floor. Ida noticed a small silver disc hanging by a leather thong around the girl's neck. She reached for it, and the girl stiffened, grasping the finely etched medallion, dropping her hand after Ida withdrew. She dried the child's blank face with a warm baking cloth from above the wood stove. What is your name? Ida's question was answered by a blink and a far-off stare from unfocused eyes. Pauline returned with a coal oil lantern and quilt. She placed the lamp on the stove before peeling the wet blanket from the foundling. Hold her up. She's sitting on it. Ida pulled the girl forward and heard Pauline's gasp, then her exhaled words. Lord protects. What is it? Asked Ida. Pauline clutched a hand to her mouth and whispered, Come see. Ida rose to stand beside her sister-in-law. Hold the lamp up, she said. When the lamplight touched the foundling's alabaster skin, Ida gasped. The girl's back was written upon, a spiral of dark symbols curling outward like the memory of a scream. Ida reached to trace it, and the child convulsed, silent, as though the touch had burned. She then slumped into the chair, eyes shut, breathing in short, stuttering sips. Mercy, Pauline rasped. Do you know her? Ida was submerged in a numbing mental mud, her thoughts and body still, until Pauline shook her shoulder, asking, Are you faint? I asked if you knew her. Ida's mind emerged from the fog and whispered, The river brought her. She felt foolish as soon as those words passed her lips. Only the Kavanaugh clan lived upriver. She was no Kavanaugh girl, not one from that stocky, black Irish brood. Pauline stepped closer. Help me get her in bed, then run for Brother Hamish. Once the girl was settled, Ida fought the storm again, scrambling up the street to the millworks. When she returned, the frail victim was propped up. Pauline spooned broth to her lips. Hamish came to the bedside, touched the girl's forehead, then took her pulse. She's very pale, and has a strong fever. I know. What's to be done? Asked Pauline. Hamish looked around the common room of the small house. Keep drafts away, continue thin soup, make her warm but not buried in bedding. Add some wood to the stove and loosen her clothing. She has none, said Ida. None? Asked Hamish. No clothes, said Pauline. Hamish turned his eyes from Ida to Pauline. I wouldn't expect you to keep her in wet things. I meant, Ida interrupted. She was naked in the street, in the storm. She blushed at saying such a thing to a man, even one trained as a physician. A lightning flash lit the house, followed by shaking thunder, drawing Hamish to look out the window at the worsening weather. "Surely, none," said Pauline. "Turn your eyes away. We've something to show you. Ida, come help me." They turned the girl on her side, facing the wall, with a tucked sheet and quilt, exposing her back. "Hamish, bring the lamp." He approached, then saw the stark white back and dark spiraled words running over the girl's bony ribs and spine. "What is it?" "We don't know," said Pauline. "She reacted a horrible violent when Ida felt the—" Her finger pointed to the back of the girl's neck, where Ida's finger had touched. Dropping her hand, her eyes met Hamish's. "She's with child." Hamish moved to closely examine the girl. Straightening, he muttered, "She's so young." Looking away, he added, "Too young." Examining her limbs, he turned over each hand, touching a pink blemish on her left wrist. "Is that a burn?" asked Ida. "No, a simple birthmark," said Hamish. As he spoke, a rumble shook the house. Hamish took to the door, opening it to the night before slamming his shoulder against it, fighting the wind as the floor tilted. "Out the back!" Hamish shouted. "I'll carry the girl. Make for the high church." Outside, the back porch gave way beneath Ida's feet. Mud swallowed her boots. Behind her, the house groaned, then tore loose, swept into the river's roar. Ahead of her, Hamish carried the young thing like a sack of coal in his arms. In flashes, Ida saw stout trees fall into the torrent. She scuttled past Hamish and Pauline, holding a storm lamp to light the footpath. First to reach the church, Ida pounded on the doors, demanding admittance. 2 men opened the portal and led her inside. She found soaked women and children, including Pauline's young daughter, Hattie. All were wretches, huddled in the pews and around the coal burners on each side. "Help!" Ida begged, struggling for breath, pointing into the dark. Father Michael and an elder stepped out, bringing Pauline and Hamish in with his bundle. When he crossed the threshold, wind rushed through the sanctuary, blowing out all but a single altar candle. Cries accompanied a sharp crack from the ceiling beam. "Move to the walls!" cried Father Michael. "Move to the walls!" With the wind howling through the church doors, Danbury's refugees rushed to huddle against the stout walls of the church as the last candle flickered. A single flame in the darkness. Another splintering crack from above pledged to collapse the roof. Ida's eyes were drawn to the girl in Hamish's arms as all the other frightened faces turned upward. In the lightning illumination piercing the windows, Ida saw the young waif's hand rise, palm toward the roof. The main beam sagged, then held. After another hour, the rough wind died to a breeze as the storm passed west beyond Danbury. In the hushed days following the storm, Danbury rebuilt the swept-away low areas plank by plank. Ida named the tattooed girl Anna after her childhood doll, the one she'd lost to a fire. In the church, long timber plank splints were joined to the center beam and deemed sufficient. Not a single roof tile had been broken. Anna was content to be led about, able to feed herself when food was placed in front of her, and attend to other personal needs. Still mute, she never acknowledged another person, never gave emotion or expression, and was never startled by noise or touch. 14 if a day, decreed Elder Carkinson's wife a few days after Anna arrived. Same as Winsome, my youngest. The town midwives declared Anna 4 months pregnant and entered January as the conception month in the birthing book. They said the low roundness of her condition was the sign of a girl forthcoming at the autumn equinox. After 2 occasions of visitors wanting to see Anna's markings, Ida made careful drawings, refusing the bearing of the girl's back. She gave Father Michael one of her sketches, hoping he would recognize the words. May 1869. The Preacher. Settled in a porch chair and under her bonnet, Ida snapped tender early beans in a wash basin. Anna sat beside her, mechanically following Ida's hands, empty fingers copying movements. "You seem rested this morning," Ida said, talking to the pan as much as to the silent girl. "Not like yesterday. I suppose the Tuesday rain kept you awake. The pelting makes the roof rattle, but I find it soothing." Ida was sure the girl was without close kin, the same as she had been, early orphaned at 9. For 7 years before coming to Danbury, Ida found her place by joining the Sanders family in Kenwick. The Sanders wife had been kind to her, taught her housekeeping, cooking, and sewing, and tended to her as she would her own daughter. It came as a surprise when Mr. Sanders announced she would leave to join in marriage with a man across the ridge. Ida was traded for a mule. Neither words nor the sound of snapping beans provoked Anna. Ida didn't expect a response. Still, she maintained conversations with the quiet one when they were alone, convinced Anna understood, at least in part. Ida stopped her hands and looked into the distance. Pauline and her family will move to their new home in a few days, as soon as the well is finished. I'll miss young Hattie. She brings lively sunshine into the house. She hung her hands over the white enameled bowl's rolled rim. Benjamin has been showing irritation, this being such a crowded situation. Ida wondered once more if the waif had a husband, or if her circumstances and condition came from actions as violent as the storm that delivered her. Benjamin had balked at taking in Anna and Pauline's husband and child. Only for a few days until the sheriff finds her family, Ida had promised, though she suspected none would be found, and none were. After a month, Benjamin built a windowless side room sufficient for a narrow bed, 2 shelves, and a candle stand. 3 apple boxes slid underneath the bunk, satisfied the need for the few clothes, shoes, and personal items donated by the town's women. A half curtain across the doorway was all the privacy Anna was afforded. On the porch, the dog beside Ida stirred and the chickens in the yard rushed away, abandoning their scratching search for grubs in the bare dirt. The man had appeared silent as a widow's midnight weep. He stood below the porch garbed in a black frock coat and a dark, broad-brimmed hat, not removing it in the women's presence. Sunken cheeks told of deprivations and the sternness of his profession. Ida sucked in a breath when she saw Anna's expression break from blank canvas to a wide-eyed stare at the visitor. Anna's body stiffened and jerked as she clutched her hand to breast where the silver pendant rested. "I am Father Perkins," the man said, in a stone, dry voice. "Sent to examine the child. Be this her?" Ida stayed silent, giving no favor to his employment or claimed charge. The priest looked along the path he'd come, then back at Ida. "Where might I seek shelter for Sammy?" Standing placid and heavy-laden behind the man, the mule's ears twitched on hearing its name. Surprised at being so abruptly accosted concerning Anna, Ida rose to stand between the visitor and the girl. He seemed a creature held by restraint, a wolf on a leash. "You can water at our well," she said, pointing to the side yard. "John Flanders may give you and your beast lodging a half-mile farther up the road." When the dark man moved on, not partaking of her offer or remarking further, Ida felt Anna's hand softly slip into hers and then release. 2 evenings later, after Father Perkins left for the second time, Benjamin told Ida, "I see no harm from it," and there was no need to be disagreeable to a priest under our roof. Ida's eyes burned with the fury of shameless scorn. "I won't have men stopping by to see the nakedness of a tender female in our care." She postured with fists to her hips. Her Dutch blue eyes flashed. "Benjamin Nathanson, would you let a man come to stare at me that way? To pry under our roof for his own curiosity?" Benjamin sought to regain his position or at least earn a draw in the argument. "The man has more than idle curiosity, and I might remind you he's agreed to take Father Michael's place in the pulpit until he recovers from the croup. Your drawings have raised questions in learned and religious men." Determined that no help would be given to the priest, Ida examined her husband's face, looking for any sign to show he could be an ally. She vowed the cleric would have to reach higher and higher, stretch his ecclesiastical muscles, before he could accept the truth Ida felt about Anna. The truth about the miracle she'd witnessed in the old church. "And with my drawings they must remain content. Anna's flesh is no concern to them, and we women disapprove of its display." Benjamin drew in a breath at the invocation. He understood the word we did not include him or any other man. "You've discussed this?" he asked. "We have, and all have agreed," said his wife. Benjamin asked no further questions and demanded no quarter. In the following days, other men turned from what they no longer saw as a local worriment, no longer their concern. September 1869. The birth. The September day was humid and still, one of many end-of-summer days serving as a contrasting reminder of the coming changes, the brown chill and fallow earth after the final harvest. Ida was at the stove, and Anna sat near as always, passing her fingers through a favorite wool scrap kept in her apron pocket. Ida continued her talk with the silent one. Benjamin likes his deer stew well simmered, and I like that a batch can last 3 days on the back plate without spoiling. Ida looked at her charge, then returned to stirring the stew pot. Anna, hand me the salt, if you please. It's next to the water pitcher. Ida had taken to asking Anna for small things. This time, Anna's breathing came in short huffs, a puddle spreading under Anna's chair, and a grayness coated her face. Grabbing a skillet and soup ladle, Ida hurried out the front door and laid wooden serving spoon to the bottom of the pan as hard as she could, rattling the day. When her neighbor, Mrs. Lawden, stuck her head out, Ida yelled, "Send for Hamish and the midwives." She turned back inside to find Anna squatting, wedged in the corner of her room, skirt gathered at the waist, panting open-mouthed. Silent tears accompanied slow heaves on her otherwise emotionless face. The girl's breath held, then burst out in rhythm with each contraction. In between, Anna reached out for Ida's familiar hands, gripping them for aid and kindness. When the bloody infant entered the world, Ida's hands caught its fragile pink flesh and placed it on a woolen lap blanket. She turned to the door, frantic for Hamish or some older woman to attend. Ida had seen one other birth from beside a midwife, but being that person now brought hot fear and frigid doubt. She repeated actions she'd seen the midwife perform, tying the cord, cutting it, severing it from the placenta. The infant and mother remained silent as a doe and her fawn, wary of making any sound that would draw predators toward the birthing place. Wiping mucus from the infant, Ida noted a pale pink birthmark on the inside of the baby's left wrist, the same mark as the child's mother. Otherwise, the child had the same flawless, pale skin as its mother, and as many toes and fingers. Once the baby produced a healthy, rebellious wail at being evicted from its first home, Ida laid it on Anna's breast, joining child to mother. Anna's arms came up and tenderly embraced her now quiet daughter. Other than her small size, Hamish pronounced the child and mother healthy. He'd arrived to find his skills weren't needed as the baby girl had come safely by Ida's hands. "She nurses well," said Mrs. Loudon, remarking of both as she helped bathe Anna and her infant daughter. "What shall she be named for the book?" "I fancy the name Ella," Ida said. "As good as any," said Mrs. Loudon. "No need for another." "And the surname?" Ida's mind searched. Was it to be her married name or that of her lost family? "Collins. My birth name will do for both mother and child." She knew Benjamin would not accept using his family's name. October 1870. The Curse. A year later, the first thin frost came early, glittering on the hills like a false promise of peace. Leaves had burned from green to rust, and the air hung with the scent of wood smoke. As on every morning, the town woke to the sound of children's laughter. Winsome Carkinson and Roberta Hayes walked hand in hand past the mill bridge, carrying baskets to harvest chestnuts for roasting before the Sunday meeting. Watching the girls' bright shawls disappear into the woods above Danbury, a mother brushed flour from her hands, smiled, and said to her husband, "They'll be home for supper." In early evening, 2 women stood at the edge of town, lamps raised like captured stars, calling into an empty universe. "Roberta, Winsome, darling, answer us, girls." The mother's distressed calls returned only the coming cold of night. Called by the slow peal of a church bell, men gathered, faces tight with purpose. Father Michael led a short prayer for success. "May the Almighty guide your steps and light your eyes. No harm shall hide from his justice." Brother Hamish divided them by compass points. North and west to the river forks, The rest follow the ridge trail up toward Kavanaugh Hollow. If they've lost their way, they will have headed downhill. The woods above Danbury closed around them, heavy with the smell of pine pitch. They may have followed the water, said Hamish, pushing through brambles. Children often do. After an hour, a gunshot broke the darkness. A shouted yell came. Up here! Up here! By lamplight, men gathered in the bluff above Danbury. The girls lay half-buried in the drifts of red leaves beneath an old lightning-struck oak. One child lay curled as if sleeping. The other stretched beside her, small hands clasped together. Hamish dropped to his knees. Merciful Lord! The girls' dresses were shredded, their chests ripped open, hollow. Hearts plucked as fruit from a tree. Father Perkins arrived last, his mule slow on the narrow path. He removed his hat, eyes fixed not on the bodies, but on what was etched into the rock slab above them, a spiral of letters, gray and small, winding outward in a perfect circle. It's the same, his deep voice intoned, the same as the mark on the one you call Anna. Saturday morning, Father Perkins called a gathering in the town square. His sermon was blazing fire. You've brought sin into your stone hearth, he thundered. The enemy has refuge under your own roofs. Father Michael's words came weakly. You speak harshly. We are God's people, needing healing, not recriminations. Do not speak against an innocent. Innocent? Perkins cried. Then why does death follow her? Why do the marks of her flesh appear upon the rocks where babes are slain? Ida held Anna close, whispering, Don't look at them. Don't give them reason. Anna's eyes turned upward toward the western hills above the church. In the emerging light, her irises and pupils gleamed white as river ice. The church bell tolled, though no hand touched its rope. The sound rolled, shaking Danbury. Some that day said it was wrath stirring in the depths of the earth. By noon, Father Michael's lungs had filled with congestion from the night's excursion. All that day, Danbury moved in penitence. Men spoke in murmurs, women clutched rosaries, children kept indoors like tender plants. 2 graves behind the church had not yet settled, the earth raw and dark. In the parsonage, Father Michael's voice came as a harsh whisper. You've no right to stir the town against a child. Father Michael's yielded to a liquid cough. Zeal has poisoned your judgment. Father Perkins stood rigid, hands locked around his Bible. Zeal? He repeated, his tone rising like a drawn blade. It's faith that drives me, the same faith that has grown weak in you. Perkins' fingers whitened on the Bible's edges until the leather creaked. You saw the mark, Father. The spiral cut on those rocks was the same as on that girl's back. Are you blind or unwilling? Michael steadied himself against the table, breath ragged. I saw grief carved in that stone, not witchcraft, he whispered. And I fear the devil that moves through you more than any branded child. Perkins' mouth twitched, a grimace passing for a smile. Fear, he said softly. It's the instrument of the Lord. It wakes the soul from its slumber. That child, he struck the table with an open palm, the lamp trembling. That abomination is the reason the ground drinks our children's blood. The echo rattled through the small room. Father Michael flinched but stood firm, voice low. If you cast stones at the innocent, you'll find yourself building hell 1 brick at a time. Perkins turned sharply, the light catching in his eyes. Then I'll build it high enough for heaven to see. He rose, the chair scraping hard along the stone floor. You've no place at the Sunday pulpit, he hissed. I'll speak truth to these people before more coffins are nailed shut. That night, Father Michael rose from his sickbed and struggled to the churchyard. He prayed over the graves of the 2 little girls, tears cutting clean paths down his cheeks. Lord, he murmured, if there be mercy left for this place, show it now. Only the wind replied, rising from the hollow, carrying the faint cry of a child and the whisper of a mother in a language older than prayer. The body of Father Michael was found between the graves in the frost-stiffened grass, kneeling, clutching his crucifix. Sunday dawned under a ceiling of bruised clouds. Nearly the whole of Danbury crowded in the high stone church. Men with stolid faces, women clutching their shawls, faces pale as unbaked dough. Father Perkins stood at the altar, arms wide, Bible open, his voice a hammer striking stone. As he thundered, a wind rose inside the church, ruffling shawls and shivering the altar candles' flames. There walks among us one marked by the old serpent. She bears its language upon her flesh and has brought ruin to the innocent. The blood of babes cries from the ground. For days, all of Danbury talked of the sermon. Some said the man was possessed by avarice. Others said he was drunk on his own voice, though few openly gave those opinions. The mill foreman swore he'd felt the stone floor shudder beneath his boots. To his wife, Benjamin Nathanson tried to dismiss it. "He's a hard preacher, that's all," he said at supper, his tone wearied. Some of the old Southern clergy thunder like that to rouse the sinner's heart. I'd have sat across from him, face drawn, hands still. "That wasn't thunder, Benjamin. That was cruelty." She met his eyes. "I'll not step foot in that church again while that man stands behind the pulpit. I will not have the Lord's house turned into a place that curses the innocent." Benjamin looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You'll be marked for gossip if you stay home come Sunday." "Let them gossip," she said quietly. "Better their tongues wag than my conscience burn." The next Sunday, by the kitchen window, Ida read Psalms from the family Bible. Anna sat nearby, pale and calm, tracing the spiral on her medallion with her thumb. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters, and for an instant Ida thought she heard a faint echo of Father Michael's voice carried on the air, a hollow cry. The river, the water remembers. November 1870, The Fury. "She's doing well," Ida told Anna, watching 1-year-old Ella make an effort to crawl across the quilt laid on the kitchen floor. By the almanac, November 7th marked the final day for the late harvest of root vegetables, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, and nuts. Most crops were already dry stored in bales, bags, and bins. Others were canned or hung from rafters for air drying. The root cellars were full to bursting, and the final harvest day served to tell the end of the furious gathering that would tide over the coming winter and spring planting. Harvest has been plentiful, and I am glad the canning we women endured is behind us. We near ran out of sealing lids in the canning shed until Mrs. Loudon's husband bought more at Bonner's dry goods store over to Bucks County. Anna sat near Ida, watching Ella on the floor. Ida thought it uncanny how Anna knew before the baby fussed that a feeding was needed. With the coming of her child, she became more active, attending to the feeding and cleanliness of the infant, though her face remained expressionless. Ida's thoughts held that Anna hadn't experienced any life before being found in the storm. "Of course that's silly," she said to herself. She must have been somewhere and had a mother, if not a family. Standing at the stove, Ida caught sight of bare feet rushing, a flash of color as Anna's dress disappeared through the front door. "Anna!" Ida cried. By the time she reached the door, the girl was up the street, sprinting to Church Hill. She turned back and scooped up the infant to follow, stopping long enough at the Loudons' house to implore, "Take care of Ella. I've need to find Anna." On the street, Ida caught sight of Anna on the hill, passing through the doors of the stone church. Ida was breathless when she reached the oak portal, remembering the night of the flood, the huddled women and children, the crack of the roof beam, the single candle that refused to die. Inside, she found Anna standing in the center aisle, naked and pale, clutching the hands of 2 altar boys, shielding them from the horror before the altar. Father Perkins hung suspended in the air, enormous and wrong, his body wrapped in feathered black smoke, coiling, breathing as though alive. Ida's scream tore from her throat. The air inside thickened, pressing against her lungs. The altar candles burned with a greenish flame. In that sickly light, Father Perkins' face gleamed red, the skin drawn tight over bone, eyes hollowed to flame. Caught in the wind, Anna's hair whipped around her face like a halo. The markings on her back rose beneath her skin, glowing gold and alive, pulsing in time to an earth beat. The altar boys sobbed and clung to her arms. Their cries echoed like lambs cornered by wolves. "Stop, boys, stop!" Ida shouted, her voice small against the roaring dark. Perkins' body twisted, spine cracking loud as a musket. His voice came doubled, the priest's and something older beneath it. "Come to me," it thundered. "Come to me, my children." His arms stretched, hands reached to the boys as his head tilted back, issuing a rolling laughter, freezing Ida's mind. Black tendrils lashed outward, coiling around pillars and rafters. The church smelled of iron and lightning. Ida recoiled as serpent smoke ropes wove about him. Through the haze, his voice became two, the priest's and another far older, something that spoke not to the ears but to the marrow of complaining bones. The sharp smell of ozone hung thick in the nave. Pointing at Ida, he yelled, "She was mine before your God found this place. You stole her from the river. She was my promise, my vessel." Anna's mouth opened for the first time since Ida had known her. What came out was not speech, but song, an incantation older than any prayer. The black smoke stilled, then shuddered. Perkins' floating body twisted, writhing with a scream of desire not met. Smoke tendrils fled from Anna's glowing back. The walls of the church quaked. Pews splintered, windows cracked, shattered in their frames. Anna turned to Ida, eyes moonstone white. "Take the boys," she said, the first words Ida ever heard her speak. That exhortation gave her the courage to move through the choking air to where Anna stood fearlessly facing the towering menace. In startlement, Ida felt Anna press her medallion into her hand. "Protect!" came an angelic voice rippling from the masonry walls, clear, powerful, a command. Ida seized the boys and dragged them to the back of the church. Perkins howled, the voice of many through one mouth, "Return to me!" The boys pulled at Ida's hands, trying to submit to the order. She held tight, struggling. When she looked at the white-haired girl, the spiral on Anna's back blazed white-hot. Light burst upward, forming wings that filled the nave. The radiance struck the black smoke, splitting it apart. A forceful push thrust Ida and the boys out the church doors into daylight before the great archway slammed shut. The ground quaked once more, then fell still. The sound that followed was like breath drawn in after drowning. She released the boys, imploring them, run home, boys, get help." In Ida's mind came Anna's soft voice. "The deep river wanted my child. It lives beneath and calls to the children." Drawn by the noise, men came running up the hill. It took several with pry bars to open the church doors. Inside, the pews were ash. 2 other piles remained, one white, one black, where Ida last saw Anna and the demon. That same night, the women's circle met. Ida told her story, the boys theirs. When all had spoken, it was decided the church would remain forever closed. In that circle, Ida swore to raise Ella as her own.